Plenty of political headlines this morning, which means Caroline Heldman is here, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College, here to break it all down for us once more. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Giselle.
Well, we begin with another mass shooting. 5 people dead this time in Oklahoma, including the gunman. Follows the horrific school shooting in Uvalde, as you know. There is some talk of bipartisan discussions going on regarding background checks and age limits. Do you see anything changing? Do you think anything is possible with gun reform? And if so, where?
Well, Republicans have long said that nothing is possible, but Mitch McConnell did direct some of the senators to sit down next week and consider this. If I were them, I would be very concerned, obviously, about folks who are very pro-gun in my district or in my state. They may come up with something, but the best they will come up with is something very tepid. We should not expect to see major gun reform, even though polls have likely shifted in favor, even more in favor of gun control, because that we have that 1 in 3 Americans who is very fiercely pro-gun and is standing in the way of real reform.
Speaker Pelosi says she's going to bring forward legislation, at least she says, to ban military-style assault weapons next week. How significant?
It is unlikely to pass in the Senate. I believe the House will easily pass an assault weapons ban, as well as maybe an age requirement and a background check requirement, which 91% of Americans support. But it's DOA in the Senate at the present time.
Okay, speaking of Nancy Pelosi, I have to ask you, her husband in a Porsche getting a DUI. Not great timing for the midterms. What do you make of it?
Well, it's interesting. I'll bring up a point that women are often held accountable for the actions of men in their lives. And these are two very different carbon-based forms of life, right? They're two different people. This wasn't Nancy Pelosi's decision, and I don't think it'll have an effect. She's a pretty popular speaker and very popular in her district.
All right, I have to ask you about what's happening on the high court. Law clerks, they're seeking counsel because the Supreme Court officials there are making this move to get their private phone records in an attempt to track down the leakers of the Roe versus Wade draft. This is unprecedented.
It absolutely is, Giselle. You're right. This has never happened before. The court, I think, is very worried about appearing politicized, especially after a very politicizing decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is likely to come later this month. What this means is that certain law clerks will respond, they'll lawyer up, and this could change the trajectory of their career. These are very prestigious positions. So even if they had nothing to do with the leak, their response to this might actually harm their careers.
Yeah, rights to privacy involved here. All right, moving to Ukraine. The Russians have seized the east and the Donbass regions, pretty dominant, going after now Kharkiv. The president, after saying he would not approve long-range missiles that could potentially hit Russia, has reversed that and says he is. What's the risk here?
The risk is that either accidentally or intentionally, Ukraine escalates things by using these rockets to go into Russia. And that is why the Biden administration was initially very reluctant to do that. But it speaks to the desperation of what's happening in the East. Russia now holds 20% of the country. And even though the EU and European leaders have passed some very significant economic sanctions, they won't really feel the effect until the end of the year. So this is an act of desperation.
All right, before we get to the California primaries next Tuesday, primaries across the nation have proven a mixed bag for former President Trump. He suffered what some might call an embarrassing defeat in Georgia, particularly where his backed candidates failed. How would you define his grip still on the party?
Well, he's still the most popular member of the Republican Party, and I think his influence actually extends beyond his endorsements. So even the candidates who didn't get his endorsements who won are very Trumpian, right? But he did suffer perhaps some embarrassing losses with Madison Cawthorn, and as you point out, David Perdue, the candidate that he actually talked into the race to run against Brian Kemp because Kemp refused to overturn the election, he lost. So Trump has a little egg on his face, but he still has a lot of influence in the Republican Party.
All right, I've got to ask you, with the time we have left, the California primary coming up, the mayor's race, all eyes on it. Rick Caruso leading, Karen Bass with Kevin De Leon in third. Do you think one of the top two candidates will get 50% and avoid a runoff in November?
I think it's unlikely. It could happen. Caruso could pull it out, according to internal polls. He is doing well, better than the other candidates, as you know, with Karen Bass right behind him. But I actually think what we'll see is a runoff between Karen Bass and Caruso. And, you know, this is somebody we didn't really know a few years ago. He spent $35 million kind of buying his way into the race through name recognition and lots of ads. So very interesting race between a centrist and someone who is further to the left, and that would be Karen Bass.
And speaking of the mayor's race, outgoing Mayor Eric Garcetti still reportedly insisting his confirmation will happen as the ambassador of India. But there is growing sentiment coming out of the Hill that it's in real jeopardy. What do you think?
I think it's in real jeopardy. Maybe he knows something we don't know, but Chuck Grassley did an investigation of what Garcetti knew about the sexual harassment in his office, and Chuck Grassley came out with some pretty damning results. So what the Biden administration will want to do is avoid a very public shellacking from Republicans going after Garcetti during the nomination process. So I don't think Biden's going to put himself in that position.
And really quickly, I just really want to ask you about this big victory in the libel suit against Johnny Depp. It was like a soap opera, sex, drugs, violence. It had it all in this relationship. I'm interested in your take. What happened here? Is this a setback for women, as Amber Heard is claiming, or was justice done?
I think it's a setback for women, for everyone, in the sense that we already knew that Johnny Depp had engaged in domestic violence. This was confirmed through evidence in this trial, but also in the UK. We learned that Amber Heard also engaged in that, but that's not what was actually at stake here. What was at stake is the ability to talk about it. And Johnny Depp successfully silenced Amber Heard. This will be a tactic that we see other perpetrators using as we move forward, especially celebs.
And it's so hard to get a conviction in libel cases. I mean, the bar is really high, isn't it?
It is, and they both got a conviction, and I think that's an important thing to note, too. Both of them libeled each other, and yet that seems to be getting lost in the media shuffle.
Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. We had a lot to get through. We got to go through it like a conveyor belt, but I appreciate it because we need some updates. So thank you so much. Have a great Thursday and a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Giselle. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too. See you at the primaries. I know you'll be lending your vital voice on the election night. All right. Beautiful look from Griffith Observatory at a hazy Thursday morning. We'll be back.